In this second lecture, we'll discuss employee compensation in terms of pay and incentives. Compensation is obviously of high importance in the recruitment of talent, but also in the motivation and retention of current employees. As such a large financial commitment for an organization, it's important that HR helps the organization to get it right. We'll discuss how compensation programs are put together, as well as some compensation terminology and concepts that you're likely to encounter in your HR career. The goals of compensation plan are twofold. 1. To enable employers to attract and retain employees who will contribute to their success. And 2. To ensure that employees feel they are compensated or rewarded fairly and equitably for their efforts and contributions. Let's look at some of the factors and considerations that determine how much employees should be paid. First, where are the employers competing for talent? If it's local, a company needs only to match or exceed local competitors. But you certainly cannot expect someone that you're recruiting to come to Manhattan, New York, to accept the same pay that might be expected in Manhattan, Kansas, due to cost of living and other factors. Another factor is the talent set an employer competes for, the skills and the knowledge level of the potential employee. For example, if it's a very specialized skill, or if it's scarce or highly sought after, you may need to pay more. You need to understand how competitive you need to be if the talent set is critical to your organization. You also need to know how strongly the employer wants to compete. In other words, does the company want to be the leader in the market or just meet the market? Or perhaps the company lags in market compensation but will attract people in other ways. You also need to be aware of what job duties will be performed, as that determines employment classification as either exempt or non-exempt. This classification scheme, governed by the FLSA or Fair Labor Standards Act, also impacts the pay rate. Non-exempt employees are eligible for overtime pay for hours worked in excess of 40 hours per week. So, an employer has to maintain a record of time. Exempt employees, on the other hand, are typically professionals, executives, or administrative positions that meet minimum weekly pay guidelines. They are not entitled to overtime, but they have a set level of pay. When designing a compensation system, HR professionals also need to keep in mind the messaging to employees regarding the organization's objectives. What is important or of value to an organization, which translates into pay structures and attracting and retaining critical talent? And are these critical skills learnable by current employees? And should those employees be incentivized to develop those skills in return for a boost in pay? So we're sending a message that it's not just the length of time an employee works for an organization, but it's also the skills that they bring. Along with messaging, the key is to create a culture of motivation with the aim of driving employees to perform effectively, and this can be tied to the compensation model. One example of a compensation philosophy that really governs a culture is with Whole Foods, where the company is very transparent about their compensation. So everyone can, if they want to, access and review pay levels all across the organization. And in doing so, they want to bring about a culture of equity, of transparency. Now, in determining the development and management of a compensation plan, it should be reiterated that all the previous lessons can come into play here in regard to the strategic functioning of HR. Do we have employees internally with the skills we need to match organizational goals? What would happen if those employees left? Are those needs external? And how much are we willing to pay to get those skills? Are they necessary for the long-term success of the organization? Once we know the answers to these and other questions that define the business strategy as it relates to how much we pay, then we can start working on the compensation model process. To begin drafting a job compensation plan, first you'll need to conduct a job analysis and evaluation. We want to determine the duties of the jobs and if there are things like management responsibilities or high-dollar financial responsibilities that go with the position. The job evaluation is a method of determining the worth to the organization of each job, as well as the factors that would make the job either exempt or non-exempt. Next, a factor analysis is conducted. Often jobs are compared to other like jobs in similar geographic areas by looking at salary surveys that cover a similar industry. That will give a good ballpark for how the organization stacks up against the normal market pay for that job. And next, a compensation program is designed and implemented, one that has clear delineation of pay structures, pay grades, or pay bands. The structure will be representative of the company's industry and where the organization wants to strategically be within the competitive market. And, of course, it needs to meet your organization's financials. As such, compensation programs need to be continually evaluated and reviewed. Typically, they are looked at annually or biannually, comparing the organization to the market, reviewing internal data and other facets. For instance, HR might look at exit interview data to determine if pay is a reason why top performers are leaving the company. It's an iterative and detailed process. When designing an equitable compensation system, you need to consider elements of equity. External equity takes into considerations those who perform the same job but at different organizations. In fact, this is the consideration of how much a competitor pays for the same job function, and adjusting your compensation accordingly. Internal equity refers to the relationship among jobs within a single organization. For example, between a clerk and a salesperson, you might examine their responsibilities, what kind of profits they generate, etc. To begin, you would look at the job descriptions themselves as opposed to the individual employees. However, there does come a time when you shift focus of internal equity to individuals. You might compare all salespeople in the company to determine which are the highest performers, who brings the most prospects or sales, and ranking individuals' pay based on the performance scheme. And of course, you want to evaluate the jobs themselves through job evaluation. Putting these pieces together, you would consider the job descriptions, consider the individuals performing those jobs, consider their performances, and ensure that equity across job duties and pay matches. It's a process of ranking and grading jobs by comparing the duties and responsibilities, skills and knowledge set with other jobs and matching those to what the compensation should be. The job evaluation determines the relative worth or the money value of a job to the organization. Put basically, you need to be able to substantiate what you're doing in terms of your compensation. Employers and HR in particular should be meticulous in regard to pay equity and compensation planning. They could use wage and salary surveys to find out what other organizations are paying for particular skills. They should seek to integrate external information with the internal evaluation of jobs. Once equity has been determined internally and externally, HR typically groups together similar jobs into pay grades and prices the compensation of those pay grades by using wage curves. In other words, I might have a pay grade of administrative assistant, and that pay grade spans between $40,000 and $60,000. Within that range, I might want to differentiate them. What are the skills and responsibilities at $40,000, and what are the skills and responsibilities at $60,000? How would an administrative assistant then move within that pay grade? This is why frequently organizations will have Admin Assistant 1 or Admin Assistant 2 and so forth, to further differentiate and substantiate grade-based salaries on skills and responsibilities. These previous examples were based on exempt salary employees. Now let's look at wage payments for non-exempt employees. Paying based on time worked is the oldest method out there. Whether it's an hour, a day, or a few minutes, the essential point is that the production of worker is not taken into consideration on fixing the wage. It's only fixed on the amount of time that's spent on that work. One advantage is that all workers doing the same work get the same wages. The disadvantage, of course, is that there's no difference in pay between an effective and a non-effective employee. Another system is called the piece rate payment. Under this system, Workers are paid according to the amount of work done, or the number of units completed, the rate of each unit being settled in advance. So it doesn't matter how much time it takes to do it, the workers are paid according to their efficiency and productivity. The disadvantages, of course, are that you are not incentivizing employees for quality, but just for quantity. There's also the balance or debt method, which is a combination of time and piece rates. The worker is guaranteed an hourly rate with an alternative piece rate. If the earnings of a worker at piece rate are greater than the amount that they would earn through time, they get the credit for that balance. An incentive or reward scheme can be anything that attracts an employee's attention and stimulates him or her to work. According to Burrick and Smith, an incentive scheme is a plan or program to motivate employees or group performance. An incentive program is most frequently built on monetary rewards, but it can also include a variety of non-monetary rewards as well. Incentives can be classified into direct compensation, meaning basic salary or wage, and that might also include overtime work. It might include a holiday premium or bonuses paid on performance as well. The primary advantage of this incentive is the inducement or motivation for higher efficiency and greater employee output. Then there's indirect compensation, including things like protection programs, insurance plans, pensions, retirement plans, vacation, holiday, or sick pay, and so forth. These can frequently become maintenance factors, why someone would remain working for a company and remain happy in that job. It's basically a retention strategy. In long-term incentive plans, each group member receives a bonus based on the output of the entire group. It might be the entire company, or a department, or a specific function, but one worker's performance reflects not only his or her effort, but also that of coworkers. This approach encourages cooperation among group members. Group production levels tend to be more stable than individual ones. Group plans also facilitate on-the-job training. One example of a long-term incentive plan might be profit sharing, in which bonuses are paid out at year's end or at the end of the quarter, when the revenue and the productivity numbers are in. And lastly, we'll discuss non-monetary incentives. While monetary incentives often appear as important motivators, many factors unrelated to money can also serve as attention-getters and encouragers of action. For some, this might be a special job assignment or the opportunity to work with certain people or departments, or within special committees. An employee who desires responsibility or power may respond well to an opportunity where he or she can gain leadership. Persons interested in enhancing their reputations and receiving recognition in the eyes of others will respond well to verbal praise. The non-monetary incentive for that person often is what they need to boost themselves up and be incentivized, engaged, and motivated.